There's a question that I get regularly, and it's what is Bitcoin backed by? So I think before I can really answer that question, Bitcoin's not backed by anything. I'll start off with just that. Um, Bitcoin is a commodity on its own, and it doesn't need to be backed by anything. So before we can actually go into that, I think that's a pretty deep rabbit hole to go into. Before we can go into it, I want to talk about the current system and what the current system is backed by, how the current system works. The current system is based on fiat money. So what fiat money is, you can see here. This is on Investopedia. You can see here, fiat money is government-issued currency that's not backed by a physical commodity such as gold or silver, but rather by the government that issued it. So when you think about US dollars, Canadian dollars, the value is based on supply and demand, right? And it's based on the stability of the issuing government. So if fewer people want it, value goes down. If more people want it, value goes up, right? So there's no commodity backing it. There's no real asset. It's just pieces of paper. So if you think about it, it costs the same amount to print a $1 bill it takes the same energy to print a $1 bill as it does to print a $100 bill, right? And I feel like there's a problem there that most people don't even notice, right? So the biggest problem is that there's a group of people who can print fiat currencies at will, right? So the current fiat currencies are dollars, euros, yen, won, all these currencies around the world. I think the main problem here is that because they can be printed at will, it means that your government has there's no limit to how many of those currencies can be in supply in circulation, right? So what governments do is because they can print them at will, because they can print these currencies at will, they use that to their advantage to do things that they want to do. So, for example, if they want to fund a certain if they want the world to go a certain way, they can print money and throw money at people to incentivize them to do something. So, for example, if for real estate governments want the Canadian, the U.S. government, they want people to invest in real estate. So what they can do is they can essentially give people credits. They can give people tax benefits. They can give people benefits for actually owning real estate. And how do they do it? They do it by printing, by issuing more money, by borrowing money, by just putting that tax burden instead of putting it on real estate investors, they put that tax burden on everyone else, right? So because of how fiat currencies work, governments can print them at will. There's no limit to how many of them can be produced, right? And because there's no limit to how many can be produced, and they're purely based on supply and demand. So you can see here that relationship between supply and demand. As supply goes up, this is this a very basic economics concept. When supply goes up and there isn't enough demand to make up for that supply, value goes down. So if you've noticed, we're all dealing with inflation today. We're all dealing with prices constantly rising. Everything has gotten more expensive. But why is that? It's because the form of money that we're valuing things in, the form of money that we're using to value all these things that we use every day, housing, the camera that I'm using, the computer that I'm using, all this stuff, the walls behind me, the house, what we're using to value it has no ceiling. There's no ceiling to how many can be created. So what governments can do is they can create more and more of this currency. They can create as much as they want to, and it hurts everybody else, right? They get to take advantage. There's something called the Cantillon effect, where I wrote a free ebook. If you want to read that, I wrote about it in there. But essentially, because of the Cantillon effect, whoever gets money, so governments print money, they hand it out to people, they give them an incentive. Whoever gets that money first, or even governments, whoever gets that money first, they're the ones who get to take advantage, because prices that money hasn't entered the economy yet, so prices haven't risen. So whoever gets it last, usually the people getting it last are the workers. So let's say the U.S. government wants to fund something, they pay a company, that company pays its employees to create that whatever it is. The workers are the last ones to get that money, right? So when those workers get that money, by that time, the cost of everything has already increased. So I won't go into that too much, but I just wanted to talk about how fiat currencies are created, why they're always failing, right? So fiat currencies are not backed by anything, right? They're not backed by gold, they're not backed by silver, backed by nothing. They're purely backed by trust. And with fiat currencies, it gives one group of people the power to do whatever they want, and there is a massive danger here, right? Governments can print as much as they want. They can lead to hyperinflation. They can lead to much more expensive prices for everything, right? Once you understand how fiat currencies work, that's when you can understand why Bitcoin is a solution to all of to the majority of the economic problems we have today, in my opinion, at least. Over time, when you see that fiat currencies can be printed at will, and we're using those to value things, you realize that there's a relationship, right? As more fiat is printed, there's more the prices go up, costs go up, and these fiat currencies, they're called so gold and silver, for example, they're physical commodities. They're physical goods that you can use as money. You can exchange them. You can take them. Fiat currencies are just pieces of paper, right? They're entries on a computer screen. They're really nothing, right? They're just bytes of information. Nobody has control over how many of those bytes are created. We have no idea how many of those bytes are created, right? We don't control anything. We have no understanding of how many of these currencies can be printed tomorrow. We don't know. The rules can be changed pretty much immediately, right? And it all depends on whether or not governments want to print more. And we've seen these issues come up in the past. We've seen these issues come up multiple times, right? So let me switch over to another tab. In the past, there are a lot of fiat currencies that have failed. So this is just 9 of them. For example, we have the Zimbabwe, I believe the Zimbabwe dollar. Yeah, Zimbabwe dollar. You can see this bill is worth $10 billion, right? So I think what this shows is that there's tons of other ones, right? Imperial Chinese money, John Law's paper money disaster in France. These are all around. There's one called the what's it called? Weimar, the mark, the German. I think it's called the German mark. It went to it basically had no value at one point, right? Because what the German government was doing is it was printing money to solve the problems that it had. So, for example, Germany abandoned the gold standard at the start of World War One, and printed money to pay for the cost of war. So they went into wars. They did what they had to, and they printed money to fund all of that, right? Because governments they don't create products and services. They govern us, right? They tell us what to do, and because they tell us what to do, we trust them to print our money as well, right? So in Weimar, Germany, there was an instance of hyperinflation. Let me show you here. I'm going to show you a picture here. So you can see here. You see from this picture. Let me show you here 1 second. Okay, so you can see here that there was a period of deflation when gold's price kept stable, and then within it, so there was a period where the price of gold went up when you priced gold in German marks, Weimar marks. When you priced it in gold, it stayed about the same for a little while, and then eventually it started just going up. Because the difference is that you can print fiat currencies, but you can't print gold. So you can see here, in January 1919, one ounce of gold traded for 170 marks. By November 23rd, 1923, that same price was 87 trillion marks. 87 trillion. So this is a chart based on, this is a log chart, right? You can see here that the number is going straight up. But if you look at these numbers here, they go up by orders of magnitude, right? It goes to 100 million here, 1 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion, 10 trillion, 100 trillion, right? So there's no limit to how many dollars can be printed. There's no limit to how many dollars can be printed. There's no stopping governments from printing more. If they need to keep their war going, if they need to keep whatever incentive they have, if they need to keep funding it, they will print more, right? And I think the problem with all of this is that we are using the money that they give us to fund our lifestyles, to pay for our lifestyles. We're giving away our finite time, and we're getting back these dollars. These dollars can be printed at will. These dollars can be created whenever governments want. They can choose to add more to the economy. The central banking system can choose to add more to the economy. And that's a problem because the things that we use are finite. The dollars that we use to value them are not. And what that does is it continuously increases the price of goods and services. So let me show you. This is a post that I saw on Reddit. Somebody created a great chart. Very interesting. I think it shows you something here. It shows you that, let me just zoom in a little bit. So we can see here 152 currencies that have failed. So this is historically 152. There are more. Of course, there is more. This is just 152 that the person created a chart for. So 152 that failed due to hyperinflation and their lifespan in years. So average lifespan 24.6 years, median lifespan 7 years, right? All of these currencies, so we can see here, the Mexican silver peso. Let's see here. So it was Mexican silver peso was around for 170 years, and now it's collapsed. Peru sol, 121 years. There's quite a few that German mark was around for 53 years. I showed you that chart where it basically went to zero in terms of gold, right? Because gold can't be printed. These currencies can. So if governments can print these currencies and throw them at the problems that they have, why wouldn't they, right? They're basically able to get free labor. They're able to get free goods and services. They're able to offer free services to their citizens. They're able to get free service in exchange. Why wouldn't they? It's basically an arbitrage opportunity for them, right? Because they press a button, they create more money, they get you to do whatever they want. You're the one giving them your power, and they're getting your labor. You're the one not your power. You're the one giving them something that's finite. They're giving you something that's infinite in exchange. So this is a problem that Bitcoin solves, right? So all these currencies have failed very quickly. Some of them have actually lasted only a few months, which is, I don't know how that would have happened, but German gold mark, I guess they tried to change the Weimar currency to the mark from the just the German mark to the gold mark. They changed it in 1923, and it went away in 2 months, right? So you can see here that these currencies don't last very long. Historically, they don't. And the reason for this is because governments lose control. They lose control of printing. They start adding more and more to the economy. They start adding more and more to the system. And the people earning those currencies can no longer pay for their lifestyle with that currency. So why would they continue to save in it, right? A currency is only as valuable as the people who are saving in it. When nobody wants to save in a currency, it loses value very, very quickly, right? So let's go into something else. So historically, the average lifespan of a fiat currency is about 35 years. Some of them don't go away because of hyperinflation. They go away for other reasons, right? So we can see here, small example throughout the last 1,000 years. So all these currencies failed pretty quickly because, if you think about it, they're just pieces of paper. They don't represent anything. They're not value. They have no value on their own. There's two different kinds of money. There's one money called commodity money. There's another form of money called representative money. So representative money is just something that you can create at will. Canadian dollars, US dollars, euros, they're all examples of this. You can see here, great chart just showing you what happened to the US dollars purchasing power over time from 1900 all the way till 2010. It just keeps going down, right? It will keep going down. As the way that the system works, we need to keep pumping more and more money into it to continue it, to make it continue working, to have it continue to work, right? So if you think about it, all these banks are lending money to people. They're creating these dollars. There's no picture of dollars here, but they're creating these dollars at will, and they're giving it to people to buy things that they want, right? Most of the people who are buying things, what they're doing is they're buying things that are they're buying things that are supposed to be more difficult to create than these fiat currencies, right? What if we had a way So the reason why fiat currencies are so valuable is because they can be easily moved from place to place. They're easier to store than gold, for example. They're much more, I guess they're much safer. If there's any kind of issues, you can just create more and give it to the person. But one of the issues with that is that whoever controls those currencies will eventually become greedy, and they will eventually start printing more to fulfill their own desires, right? So if you think about it, the last few years, few decades, part of the reason why the US government has been borrowing so much money, if you look at the US government's debt, part of the reason why they're borrowing so much money is because they need to fund social programs. All these social programs are promised to people. I think right now, let me actually show you a chart. This is the US debt clock that I think you should see. I think it's pretty interesting there's a lot of data here. There's a lot of information here. Let me expand this. There's a lot of information here, and you can see the current US national debt is at $34.6 trillion, right? And there's something else here. So you can see here, social security liability, they owe 26 is that 26 trillion? Yeah, 26 trillion, right? So they owe $26 trillion for social security. These are people who they've promised a payment to, and they likely won't be able to pay it back because there's not enough dollars in existence, right? So what they're gonna have to do is they're gonna have to print, they're gonna have to charge higher taxes. They're most likely gonna go printing, because what printing does is they have this massive debt. If they issue more money, what it does is it decreases the value of this debt, the real value of this debt, because as supply increases, demand stays about the same, or it decreases over time. More people are getting rid of their dollars. They want to buy other things. The value of this debt, the real value of this debt, is decreasing over time, right? So you can see here, there's a definition at the top there. The national public debt outstanding represents the face value of or principal amount of marketable and non-marketable securities currently outstanding. So this is what the U.S. government owes to other people. So the U.S. government, basically what they do is they issue debt. People, so the issuing debt means that they create bonds. For example, they create treasury bonds, they sell them, and people give them dollars in exchange. But more recently, the market hasn't been buying U.S. debt. So what the U.S. government has to do is it has to have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the U.S. central bank. The U.S. government has to have the Federal Reserve support its spending habit. So what the Federal Reserve does, the Federal Reserve, like I said, is the U.S. central bank. The Federal Reserve is now starting to buy the U.S. national debt. So whenever the U.S. government wants to sell its debt, whenever it wants to go further into debt, when you hear them saying we are sending more funding to another country for whatever reason, this is what they're doing. They're issuing more debt and they're selling it to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is forced to buy it now, because if the Federal Reserve stops buying it, the U.S. national financial, the global financial system will likely go bankrupt, because we all rely on dollars, right? The U.S. government is basically the root of all of that, the root of where that money comes from. So if we look at this, we can actually see other things as well. Unfunded debt or interest, U.S. total interest paid, they've paid $4 trillion in interest. Interest per adult, 17,203. U.S. total debt, I don't know what the difference is between U.S. total debt includes. Okay, so this is just individuals. There's other things here. If you want, go through this website. I think this is great. It's just usdebtclock.org. If you Google U.S. debt clock, you'll find it. You can see here, U.S. unfunded liabilities is at $214 trillion. $214 trillion. And this is going to be owed within the next few years, right? This liability is owed to U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens are the ones that are supposed to be getting this. So we can see here, assets per citizen. This shows the assets. This shows the liabilities. Small business assets, corporate assets, household assets, the U.S. total. This is divided by individual. The U.S. has fewer assets per citizen than it has liabilities per citizen. I know there's a lot more to this. This goes a lot deeper than what I just talked about. But the point here is that this national debt will continue to go up. And this national debt goes up when the U.S. government borrows more money. As it borrows money, because it needs to pay for whatever it needs to pay for, it'll go up, right? So eventually we'll see 35 trillion, 40 trillion, 45 trillion, 50 trillion. It'll keep going up, right? You can see your debt per taxpayer. Each taxpayer in the US, has if you split this debt equivalently between everyone, each taxpayer owes 266,951. But this is actually, if you think about it, this is actually a really smart way to do things for somebody from that side, right? Because as the debt goes up, as the US government continues to issue, print, borrow more money, the value, the real value, the inflation adjusted value of this debt goes down. So if you think about it, I'd say 15 years from now, this might be $70 trillion, maybe more, right? It'll double in that time. It'll keep going up, right? There's no way for it not to. The US government is having to now start, so you can see your interest on debt, $811 billion. The US government is now having to borrow money to pay debt on the money it's already borrowed. So it's basically, if you think about it, it's almost a Ponzi scheme. They're adding new people into the pool of taxpayers so that they can tax them and they can pay their debts. When they can't do that, when people aren't earning enough, when people aren't paying enough taxes, the US government has to print more, right? Their interest on the debt is soon going to be higher than their defense spending, which to me is absolutely nuts, right? And it'll keep going up. These numbers will keep going up, meaning the price for everything else will keep going down. The value of the dollar will keep going down. The value of the price of everything will keep going up, and the value of the dollar will keep going down. So why do fiat currencies fail? Fiat currencies are issued by countries. The value of that currency is based on essentially trust, right? It depends on political, economic, financial stability of that nation. Of course, if a country is not stable, it's not going to, the currency is not going to be stable either. The currency will decrease in value. Fiat currencies collapse because of geopolitical instability, economic crisis. Like let's say in the US I'm not even in the US, but the US had a great financial crisis in from 2007 to 2009. I don't think that's been dealt with yet, because what they did was they just printed more. They dumped more money on the system, right? The companies that made mistakes back then, the companies that were lending irresponsibly back then, are still doing that. And those countries are even more in debt, right? All these countries are so leveraged. What that means is they've borrowed so much money that they can't pay back what they owe unless the system continues to increase. The system keeps adding more money to the system because they don't have enough money to do that, right? They're essentially borrowing money from banks. What they're doing is banks are borrowing money from their depositors. They're using that money to buy US Treasury. So the entire system, if you think about it, it's a house of cards, right? If depositors start taking their money out of the banking system, the banks can't buy US Treasuries. If the US government can't sell US Treasuries, it can't fund all of its liabilities. You've probably heard people saying, oh, the debt ceiling. You've probably heard Janet Yellen saying, oh, the US government is about to go bankrupt. Not entirely true, because they're just going to keep printing more and more, right? They're just going to keep increasing that debt ceiling over time. And it'll make things worse for the individuals that are living in the country, right? So there's a lot of relationships that you can see between the fall of the Roman Empire and the potential fall of the US, right? So the reason why I say that is because the US is kind of doing something very similar, right? So constant wars, overspending, oppressive. I mean, taxation I don't think is oppressive yet, but eventually it can be, right? Workers are paying a lot more in taxes than the people who are passively earning income. So what's happening is work is being disincentivized. If you work a job, you pay more taxes than somebody who owns stocks or somebody who owns real estate, which is, to me, it's completely backwards, right? If you're putting in the time to create products, to create goods and services as an employee, you should get either a part of the company. I mean, there should be maybe something mandated where you get a part of the company. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but the people who are doing the work shouldn't be the ones taxed the most. I think that's the main point here. For Rome's economy, it depended on slaves. I mean, you can't really say that we have slaves today, but a lot of the companies that are doing really well, they're paying their employees barely enough to survive, and those people are having to work 4 jobs, 3 jobs a day, 2-3 jobs a day, 2-3 jobs at a time to make ends meet, just to make ends meet. They're spending all of their time giving away all their time to these companies. These companies are getting free or very, very cheap labor. The people who own these companies are living lavish lifestyles, shareholders, executives, all these people, they're living great lives while the people who are working are suffering, right? So this is where Bitcoin comes in. When you think about how Bitcoin works, when you think about just how the blockchain, so this is mempool. I always go to this site. When you think about how the mempool works, when you think about how the blockchain works, you can see that it's completely the opposite of the legacy financial system, right? So if you think about it, the U.S. central bank, the Federal Reserve, is the one that prints all this money. How many times have they been audited? Never, right? An audit just means you're checking to see what they're doing, how they spend their money, where their money is going, all that stuff, right? So what you're doing is you're confirming that that's where that money is going, how it's being spent, how much money they're creating, how many liabilities, how much debt they have. They've never been audited, right? On the other hand, with Bitcoin, we have a network here. So this is called a blockchain explorer. This website is called a blockchain explorer. This is the Bitcoin blockchain. You can see every single transaction that's ever happened. You can see every single time Bitcoin was moved, every Bitcoin that was created, every single one of these blocks. Let's say we'll go to this random block. Every single one of these blocks has a certain amount of Bitcoin that was created, and this Bitcoin is created on a schedule, right? It's based on a predetermined schedule. I've talked about that in the halving videos that I posted. The Bitcoin is produced on a predetermined schedule. We know exactly how much Bitcoin there will be tomorrow. We know exactly how much there will be in 2034. We know exactly how many Bitcoin there will be in 2100. We know exactly how many Bitcoin there will be 1,000 years from now. As long as Bitcoin, the network, survives, we know how many Bitcoin are going to exist. On the other hand, fiat currencies, we don't have that, right? So fiat currencies, we know now, are essentially backed by nothing. But people have this question where they say, why would I use Bitcoin if it's not backed by anything, right? So what Bitcoin is backed by is this network of computers that are confirming that every transaction on the network, on the blockchain, is truthful. It's accurate. It's not a lie, right? So we can, if we go back all the way to 2009, we can go to block number 1, January 8th, 2009. This is when the very first usable Bitcoin were created, right? So 50 Bitcoin here. We can see exactly where these coins went. I've spoken about this before in the Bitcoin layers video that I created, but you can see exactly where each coin goes, right? We can see exactly how many coins were created. We can see how many are in circulation. Every single coin has a chain. Every single coin has a history. So if we go, let's say we go to these coins here. So this wallet has 2.83 Bitcoin. In this transaction, they received $16.26. So let's say, for example, we look at this $7.62 worth of Bitcoin. If we go back to this, we can see where it came from. It came to this address and it was sent. We can go into the history. We can see every single coin, where it came from. We can see the production. We can see exactly how each coin is used. If we look into on every block, we can see that there's going to be a Coinbase transaction. This is where the coins are produced, right? So each coin is produced using the coin with the Coinbase transactions. The miners receive a certain amount of Bitcoin as a minimum amount to support the network, and they receive fees on top of it, right? So the Coinbase transaction includes the fees plus the miner subsidy. That's the minimum amount that they get. So subsidy plus fees. That's what this is. That's what this is right here. 321,000 Coinbase transaction. So the Bitcoin network, it's not backed by a physical good. It's backed by the truth. It's backed by the fact that you can look at every single transaction, you can look at every single coin, and you can know exactly when it was created. You can know how many people want to use the network at once. You can know how long it takes to create a block. You can see exactly how much it costs to put through a transaction. All this stuff is available to anyone. On the other hand, legacy financial system, none of this is available. We have no clue where the US government is getting $250 billion to send overseas. We have no idea how many transactions are corrupt. We have no idea where transactions are coming from. On the other hand, here we see everything, right? There's nothing that can be under the table on the Bitcoin network. On the other hand, with the legacy financial system, it's designed to put everything under the table, to make it so that everything is everything can be hidden, everything can be kept a secret, right? That's essentially what the current financial system is built on. So if you think about it, the old system, people say that, oh, what's Bitcoin backed by? The old system is backed by nothing, right? At least this new system is backed by something, a network of over 100,000 computers that are constantly confirming that every transaction is real, every Bitcoin transaction is correct, there's no manipulation. So here's the conclusion. So while Bitcoin may not be a physical good that's backed by something, I guess, physical, you know for a fact that the coins that you receive, let's say I pay you in Bitcoin, you know that the coins that you receive were created by someone. They were created by someone who put energy into creating them. So this block, for example, this block paid $321,000 to the miner that produced it, and the pool that produced it. It probably took that pool of miners a lot more than $321,000 to produce it, maybe a little bit less to produce that block, right? But over time, you know for a fact that these 4.971 Bitcoin, they were the 3.25 Bitcoin plus the 1.846, 3.125 Bitcoin subsidy plus the 1.846 Bitcoin fee. You know for a fact that these were paid to someone who put in the time, who put in the energy, who put in the work to maintain the network, right? On the other hand, fiat currencies, governments can create them at will. They can send them wherever they want to. They can produce them. We have to work for fiat currencies while they can produce them for free. On the other hand, if you were to work for Bitcoin, you'd be getting Bitcoin in exchange for your time, for your work, your effort. And at the same time, the Bitcoin network paid that Bitcoin to someone for doing the same thing, right? So the Bitcoin, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. You know for a fact that there's never going to be more than that. You know for a fact that whoever created Bitcoin, whoever produced Bitcoin, they put in the time and effort required to provide security to the network. If they didn't, their transaction would they wouldn't have that Bitcoin in the first place, right? They may have gotten it early, for example, they may have bought it from someone else, but at some point in time, that Bitcoin was created because whoever produced it put in the time and energy to understand how the network works, to understand how mining works, and they actually put together something to mine Bitcoin. Again, on the other hand, US dollars can be printed at will. You can press a single button to create more dollars. With Bitcoin, you can't do that. Bitcoin, there's a global competition going on to earn these Bitcoin, right? So right now, the block subsidy is 3.125 Bitcoin. We're after the halving. We're after the fourth halving. Right now, the block subsidy is 3.125 Bitcoin. The entire world is fighting to earn this Bitcoin, right? On the other hand, fiat currencies can be created at will. Banks can just lend as much as they want to individuals who, let's say, buy houses, they buy cars, they buy stocks. Banks can print those at will. Of course, the price is going to go up, right? On the other hand, on a Bitcoin standard, prices always go down because it becomes more and more difficult over time to produce more Bitcoin. Let me know your thoughts on this. I hope I was clear. I hope I was able to provide you with an explanation of how this works. Bitcoin is basically just a record of who owns what, right? That's it. You don't have to have a physical currency for money to work, right? Money doesn't have to be physical. We're in a digital age where most of the things that we use today, most of the value that we have today is not digital. right? How many times do you transact with physical cash? Probably not. Sorry, I said it's not digital. It is digital. How many times do you transact with physical cash? I don't think most people transact at all with physical cash. Last time I've used physical cash was probably a couple months ago, maybe a couple weeks. Sorry, maybe not a couple months, maybe a month ago, right? I don't use physical cash regularly. I know most people don't. I think this is the natural next step. When we went digital, it gave governments the permission to print as much dollars as they want to, right? It allowed governments to go into as much debt as they want. I'm going to show you the US national debt, and then I'll just finish off this video. I think this is a great picture to look at, right? I think just seeing what the national debt, how the national debt is growing, it shows you that the production of the dollar is scaling up. And that'll keep getting worse. It'll keep getting worse over time. It will not stop, right? It's not like it'll eventually start decreasing, right? It won't. It can't. If let me show you this tab here. So you can see here, it took until, one second. It took until almost 1995 to get to $5 trillion of debt. Now, the US government is probably going to be borrowing $5 trillion. Eventually, they'll be borrowing $5 trillion a year, and they'll keep adding to that number. This number is going to go to 70, 80, 90, $100 trillion. This is still 2020. And I mean, if we look at the current number, it's already at 34 trillion. From 2020 till now, 3 years. It took it took 3 years for the US government to add $10 trillion in debt. I wouldn't be surprised eventually this will be the annual amount that they add on. Then it'll be they'll do this twice a year. They'll add $20 trillion a year. Then they'll add $40 trillion a year. It's just because over time, they need more and more money to have the same effect, right? Because there's more and more money added to the system for them to have 1%. Let's say the total circulating dollars in the world is a trillion. Let's say $1 quadrillion. Back when it was 500 billion or 500 trillion, sorry, it would have taken half the amount of money to add to the system to make the same impact, right? So let's say they wanted to give some sort of benefit to citizens. It would have cost them less before than it does now because the value of their money is decreasing. Over time, they see their debt going up. We see prices going up, right? Over time, if you're saving in dollars, if you're saving in, if you just have your money in a bank account, you're putting yourself at risk, right? I think eventually we will see the US dollar collapse, just like every single other currency. We will see the US dollar hyperinflate. There's no way around it. I don't know how long it'll take. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think it will. But eventually, when people realize that they can no longer trust the US government to keep printing, to keep the supply of dollars low, when they can't trust them anymore, the trust in the system is gone, right? And it happens pretty quickly. It can happen overnight. For all we know, in a few years, this debt will be essentially worthless. Like with the mark, it took $87 trillion to buy 1 ounce of gold. Eventually, that'll be the case here too, right? Eventually, people won't trust the US dollar. It doesn't matter how great the innovation in the US is. The dollar is separate from the economy. The dollar does not represent the economy at this point. The dollar is completely separate. The dollar is created by the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. The economy is whoever produces goods, whoever produces services. They've completely been detached. The dollar does not represent the economy anymore. I think we're going to see this get worse. I think we're going to see the situation get much worse over time. I think more and more people will be forced to move into Bitcoin. And if they don't, they're going to see their wealth disappear. That's about it for today. I wanted to make sure that you understand why Bitcoin doesn't have to be backed by something to work as money. We've used US dollars for a while. The only thing that Bitcoin needs to be backed by is this network that confirms the truth. what we want with money is we want an accurate account of who owns what, and Bitcoin is that system that does that, right? With the legacy financial system, for all we know, banks can be adding as much money to government accounts as they want, letting governments spend as much as they want, and it puts us in a situation where we can't afford anything. So over time, I think the US dollar is going to continue getting worse. We're going to see this debt go up constantly. We're never going to see it drop. And I think Bitcoin, on the other hand, with that finite supply, with the 21 million limit, we're going to see Bitcoin's value go up. We're going to see it continue to go up. The real value may not appreciate as much as, let's say Bitcoin goes to $10 million. Maybe the real value at that time will be $3 million, right? But $3 million versus today, that real value is $70,000. In a few years, it'll be 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. That'll be the real value. But adjusted for inflation, it'll be 10 million, 100 million. Eventually, it'll be $1 billion. I genuinely think that that's where we're going. It's because the dollar will constantly be losing value. There will be more and more dollars printed. On the other hand, Bitcoin can't be printed at will. So we're going to see a lot of that wealth accumulate to people who own Bitcoin. That's it for today. I hope that was valuable. Please let me know if you have any questions, anything that I was unclear about. I want to make sure that I can improve my content going forward. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you learned something there.